Hello tanks and tankettes, and welcome to Supporter Spotlight number 65. This one has taken a little while to put together, not for any technical reasons, more because I have been sleeping horribly again over the last couple of days, and today the power was out for something like 11-12 hours, but it was a planned outage. I knew it was happening, it was just kind of really bad timing, so yeah, I didn't get any real work done previous 2 days, and then today, when I actually had slept better last night, I haven't been able to do anything until after the power's come back on. So yeah, it's been a real good start to this week. Anyway, so we're starting off this video, we're here at last, with Island Man in the SP1C, and this is, as you'll have spotted, an older version of the game, and it was one of those older versions where there were little extra quirks in the replay system. In this case, the quirk being you can't see any of the ammo counters, and you also can't see how much damage he's doing. So we're just going to have to wait and see till the actual score screen. But for now, he's taking a fairly cautious approach. It's an assault game, as you can see, and instead of zooming right to be underneath the enemy cap, he's taking more of a stepping stone approach. He's moving up through the middle and trying to spot what he can. Don't even know what equipment he's got on. Maybe he's got binos. I have no idea. But he's getting some spotting as he's doing it, and he's also getting some damage done, because this thing has actually got a fairly decent gun for its tier. It's not brilliant from going from memory, but it's more than adequate for being a tier 7 light. And it also has that 3-round auto loader. So at this point, well, there's one of the enemy scouts. This is not welcome. I think he's been more or less unspotted up till this point, but this bulldog just comes absolutely charging in, and here's where that clip does come in handy, but it's not enough to kill the bulldog. Fortunately, one of his allies does get him, so he doesn't really lose a lot of health in the process, but they definitely know he's here at this point, so he's going to have to take a little moment to get himself unspotted before he tries doing anything else. There is another enemy scout still around though, the LTTB, but he's further up north and not really an issue for now. And in fact he's pressing all the way up north, so unless he comes running down into Island Man's face, he shouldn't really be a problem. And even then, if he does, we can see how much health he's got, so Island Man can easily take him. So he moves a little bit more north himself, get some spotting on that enemy Leo. And you can tell it is his spotting, and he's also gotten some spotting on T-34-85 as well. So he is doing some spotting here, even though this isn't an aggressive push to get to that shelf. I don't know what you want to call it, the dippy bit below the raise where the cap is. I did not do well in geography at school, I'm sure you can tell. He's not really, you know, I've seen people use that, I've seen people make aggressive pushes and get there, but you know, in this case, I mean, maybe he could have, but he's only got the 2 tank destroyers that would really be able to give him any particular assistance. But even so, as I say, he is getting spotting damage out of this. Now they are getting kills, which is good, but it's not looking that great. They're 4 minutes in, and bear in mind, you know, 10-minute matches, so there's a more limited amount of time to work with. And they are actually behind on kills at the moment. They're not really winning any one particular flank. In fact, they seem to have kind of ground to a halt. And although the enemy team does have some somewhat nasty tank destroyer guns, the 122-44 and the T-28 in particular, they don't seem to be pushing through fast enough to use the bits of terrain that they could use to then advance under cover. They're just kind of sitting where they're sitting and getting out spotted and out damaged by the enemy team, it seems like. And talking of, there is in fact the T-28. So he's finally made it to this area just under the cap circle, and there are still a fair few enemy tanks left, but I think he's banking on them more being on the flanks at this point, and he is now more just trying to get some spotting done. Not really taking any risky plays here, but it's a thinly armoured light tank, it's not like he can sustain huge amounts of damage. But then he sees this opportunity to do some damage to the T-28, puts one in the axle, immediately repairs, and again, the autoloader coming in very useful, but unfortunately doesn't get any damage out of that final shot. Now, of course, he has to wait to reload the entire thing. But this T-28 is tracked all the while, so hopefully his teammates can do a bit more damage. Sadly, though, it seems like the answer is no, and I'm going to guess when you play something like the T-28, you generally do try and emphasise the repair skills, because you're going to get tracked often. However, he's not pulled into cover enough to actually avoid it happening again, so maybe not paying as much attention as they should be. So more damage done, but not quite enough to kill him, and even if the last shot had penned, it would have been maybe not that likely to kill him. He would have needed a pretty high roll with this gun to, well, not that high, but, you know, a high roll. You never really want to bank on getting a high roll. If your game comes down to getting a high roll, then RNG will inevitably give you a low roll instead, or so it seems like. But yeah, so he can't finish off the T-28, tries to put a shot of that T-32 off in the distance. I don't know what the stats are in this gun exactly, but maybe not the best sniping gun in the world. And meanwhile, you know, it's not looking good, is it? For some reason, his artillery player has run up to this position as well. They've lost the last of the tanks in the north, and as for the tanks in the south, there's really only the two of them. So it's those two heavies, Isle of Man, and the two tank destroyers. It's not looking so great. I mean, they have killed at this point over half the enemy team, but time is seriously starting to run out. So Isle of Man comes through the middle, relocates, and basically is hoping for a better firing position. So side and rear of a T-32 ought to do nicely, provided his gun doesn't troll him too much. But of course, in firing gear, he is spotted. Gets his final shot into that Su-100, however. The artillery is still somehow alive. They know they are there. In fact, the Su-100 is going for that artillery, and they will be able to easily one-shot them. But just that hesitancy in going around the corner provides Island Man with the perfect opportunity to finish him off. But he doesn't quite get it. The Jagdpanther 2 sneaks in there with a kill, but still, that is more damage. And damage is going to be the name of the game in this one. He's going to come out of this with rather more damage than the rest of his team. I'll say that, and hopefully it won't spoil too much. So he's not really in a position to rush down this T-32. They have way too many hit points. In fact, up until the point where Island Man hit him, they were full health. So the rest of the team had managed to do precisely nothing to that T-32. And when you see the rest of the team damage-wise, you might start to understand this result a bit more. A minute left. It's down to now just him and the tank destroyers, and he is spotting this T-44 and might actually do some damage as well, which will probably get him spotted. But at this point, they're not going to win. There is pretty much nothing they can do to win this. Possibly Island Man, you know, he could have gone for that more aggressive play at the start when there were more of his teammates left alive. Maybe. But I'm overall not convinced that that would have made a difference to the eventual outcome of this, because with 20 seconds left on the clock, there's no way they're going to kill things in time. We do get a bit of a comedy ending to this. Unintentional comedy. Yeah, in his haste to get away from the T-32 who's just shown up, Island Man manages to flip his tank. So, oops. It doesn't actually matter, of course. There's not enough time on the clock for the T-32 to kill him, although he does get in a final shot. But regardless, that was still enough for an ace mastery, even in a defeat, and that was actually his second mark of excellence on this tank as well, which is why he sent it to me. I don't think it was the result overall. I think it was more the fact he got a second mark of excellence and a mastery on a defeat. 2400 spotting damage, 4100 damage done himself. Roughly 3 times the XP of anybody else on the team. Most of the team landed 1, 2, 3 damaging hits at most. This is why I'm thinking even if he had taken a more aggressive approach early on, maybe he would have lit more things up. Maybe his team would have done a bit more damage early on. But given the overall performance of his teammates in that one, I'm not convinced it would have ultimately made a difference. But, of course, at this point, we'll never know. Next up, another German machine of a rather different nature, though. This is Runaway Brave Sir Robin, whose name is always a source of much enjoyment to me, in the mouse, which has itself been a source of much enjoyment to me over the years. Not that I play a huge amount of tanks myself these days, but this is probably still my most played tier 10 tank by a far margin, or indeed a fair margin. Far margin kind of works though, but it's not the actual phrase. Anyway, so this time it is just a standard game, and it is a 357, I think. Yes, and of course being top tier, well, it means there's lots of helpless, puny tier 8s to pick on. Those poor tier 8s. But there's also some nasty tier 10s as well, so it's not all about picking on the tier 8s. In this case, however, he is indeed picking on a tier 8, that T26E5, who's just giving him some nice early hits there. And of course, with how this gun hits, he's up to a not horrible amount of damage already, for those just already, you know, nearly 1,000. Just not bad for the first part of the game. He's a little alone here though. He does have that AMX M4 behind him and a couple of tanks on his flank to either side, so it's not like he's going to get rushed here. But this one's going to get a bit hairy. It starts off, you know, it's like one of those disaster films where it starts off and there's kind of shots of everybody going around enjoying the day, and it's all just normal, ordinary day, just a normal, ordinary mouse game. But you know it's not going to stay like that. Although in this case, you know it's not going to stay like that because I've just told you it's not going to stay like that. Anyway, it's not quite the same as a disaster film. In fact, this is definitely not going to be a disaster for Runaway Brave Sir Robin. Anything but. So feeling emboldened at the enemy team's initial seeming cautiousness, he pushes up and is taking off some nice extra chunks of damage, although just misses the reload on that 5120. Not that it would have killed him, but it would have left him an easy one shot for basically everything else on his team. So that would have been nice, because that is a potentially quite dangerous tank. And having gone to this corner, he's just doing classic mouse side-scraping things. And this is a quite aggressive position at this point. This is potentially a little bit risky, but although he has got his head on a real swivel here, he's ready to pull back at a moment's notice. The enemy team don't seem to particularly be intent on taking advantage of his forward position. You can see here he's actually pulling back in anticipation of other enemies trying to pop round the corner to maybe get some shots at his side armour as he's side scraping. But no, so he's just going to go for it. And there we go, there's a heat firing E100, which is, I guess, to be expected even these days. Hell, most of the ammo that's been fired at him so far has been premium rounds. It's just what you expect when you play a mouse, I suppose. But such is the armour of the mouse that, well, his armour's doing alright anyway, or his hit points are doing alright anyway. He's bounced already over 3,500 damage. So finally somebody did try for a shot into his side, but well, he's paying attention, he's backing off, and he gets a shot into that T44-100 as he does so. Now at this point he really does have to be careful that he doesn't have things popping up in front and behind him. The secret to playing the mouse, and it's not really a secret, is to try and control the engagement and, you know, do things at your own pace. Never let the enemies surround you, and always try and keep enough of a distance away from them that they're not going to be able to rush you. So this is why this is a little bit risky. Potentially he could be pushed right now. And indeed that enemy E100 there could have been far more aggressive in their positioning, but no, they're just kind of skulking around that corner, and it's to the extent now this cautiousness on the part of the enemy team that the AMX has actually pushed up to join in as well. So this is just farming at this point. 5k blocked, approaching 4,000 damage done, and nothing really seriously threatening him. What is happening, however, is that while his enemies have been playing very cautiously, his allies apparently have been doing the opposite. They've been pushing in, and it seems like just getting absolutely taken apart. So while the enemy team has lost 2 tanks, his own team is now down by over half. They've got, what, 6, 7 left? Well, no, definitely 6 at this point. So this isn't good. This is the part where the disaster, you know, the music shifts and everything starts going wrong, and, you know, there are buildings collapsing all around, and the ground's shaking, and the tornado sirens going off. Because suddenly, his flanks are very definitely not secure anymore. He's got still 2 tanks behind him, but he's had to pull back, because there's a hell of a lot that's ahead of him, and there's now even stuff that has come round to his side as well. So although he's taken out that lurver, he's now got that tank destroyer on his side, and a bunch of tanks to his south as well. Although some of them are very low health, which might be quite, you know, that might be a critical factor. A bunch of one-shot enemies running around is a very different thing from a bunch of high health enemies running around. So he's now backed into this corner. The E100 has finally decided to push up and be a bit more aggressive, and really all he's got for company is the T-44 that's immediately behind him, and then the Conqueror that's on the other side. And that T-44 was an easy one-shot, so he's out the way. The Conqueror is low health, and that just leaves runaway brave Sir Robin. Although not quite, he's also got the Waffenträger now coming up to give some assistance as well. So the AMX-30 is down, the Waffenträger puts a big hit into the E100. This E100 firing heat all the while, but managing to not pen a fair few shots. And brave Sir Robin is basically angling as correctly as he can angle here. But with those heat shells, they've got a lot of pen, so there's a chance some of them might go through either way. But I think we can maybe guess that E100 player not the best in the world. So things have stabilised a bit, but oh boy, has he taken quite a beating in the meantime. In fact, he's now up to over 10,000 potential damage, and that of course doesn't even count all the hits he's taken in the tracks. The 7,000 plus damage done is also fairly respectable in of itself, of course. And it's now to the point where, although it really looked like this was going badly, this is now winnable. It's Pershing, a T-44-100, and enemy artillery. And we know pretty much where everything is apart from the artillery. So long as he doesn't get ammo racked or anything like that, so long as he doesn't do anything monumentally stupid, he should be okay. And, well, there goes the Pershing, taken out by the Conqueror. It's a little hard to tell, maybe they were trying to come round to get better shots on Runaway Brave Sir Robin, but whatever happened, they blundered into the Conqueror, and that gun is, of course, fairly deadly. And the 2 tank destroyers should be able to tackle the T-44, but of course the T-44 can also spot the artillery. So we've skipped ahead a little bit. Brave Sir Robin has trundled onto the cap, the T-44 has run away, and the Conqueror has gone out on the field to try and find artillery. And Brave Sir Robin really is playing it safe here. In fact, this is almost going to be a slightly anticlimactic ending, because the Conqueror does spot the artillery, but he's very, very low health. And if that T-44 has gotten into a position where they can take a shot, well, although the Conqueror has killed the arty, the T-44 knows exactly where they are. And although the Conqueror has got some very good armour, the T-44 is able to just nail him somewhere where it is going to go through. So rather than go chasing after a T-44-100 in a mouse, instead he holds his ground in the cap, and at this point it really is just a matter of, is the T-44 brave enough to come and try and reset? But honestly, the odds would be pretty far against them. And so rather than do anything risky that might throw the game, he sticks it out on the cap and wins by capping. But even though it was a slightly anticlimactic ending, it was definitely anything but an anticlimactic game. So nearly 8,000 damage done, ace tanker, a bunch of medals there, steel wall of course, and strangely enough, even with all that bounced damage, even the fact that he had the most damage done on the team by a reasonable margin, it was still the Conqueror that was the top there, presumably because he had that top gun. I'm going to go out on a limb though and say that if Brave Sir Robin hadn't been there doing the mouse things that he was doing, there is a pretty good chance that that game would have had an opposite result. The enemy E100 was fairly bad though. That was what, 2 penny hits out of all that they fired? Anyway. So lastly we have warships and Andy CX in the Iron Duke, with one of those very rare games where it's a mid-tier ship being top tier. If you play warships you'll know that for tier 5 and 6 it doesn't happen that often. Although tier 7's not too bad. Tier 7 is kind of a sweet spot at the moment in warships. The Iron Duke itself, quite a storied real-life ship. In warships terms, though, it's mostly known as being one of those filthy Royal Navy HE spammers, as indeed are most of the line. Not the tier 6 and the tier 8, though. I mean, you see people firing HE with them anyway, but it doesn't have that same monster HE fire chance. Andy, however, you will see mostly using AP, and certainly for being top tier, it's just fine. You know, it is more than good enough. For being down tiered, I think you can then make an argument for using the HE shells, but I personally, and I don't need to bang on about this too much, but I still don't think the British HE was a good idea. I still think that it isn't a good thing for the game overall, and it's one of the few things that can get me genuinely annoyed enough to stop playing on any given day is just getting spammed to death by, well, any of them really. But yeah, I mean, I try and make a point of it myself when I play them to at least, you know, somewhat intelligently try and use the AP shells, but so many players don't. But Andy isn't going to be one of those players. Now, have you noticed the thing that's wrong with this replay yet, by the way? This is an 0612 replay. And I don't know how many people remember back to, this would be like September, October last year, I think, when we were on 0612. But yeah, those replays that were going up on people's YouTube channels at that point were missing a certain thing. That thing being shell tracers and shell hit indicators, and even the muzzle flashes. They were just, well, actually no, wait, the muzzle flashes are there. I take that last part back. But the shells themselves are entirely absent, and so it's kind of hard to see what the distribution is up until the point where you actually get the hit markers. This game overall is not going to be unlike the last game with the mouse, although maybe not quite to such a dramatic extent, and there's also definitely going to be an element of derpy player behaviour in this one. Certainly at one particular moment where it seemed like it was going to be much more perilous than it actually was, and you will definitely know that moment when it arrives. For now though, Andy is just pummeling away at his enemies and making his way towards the centre, it seems like. They've got a destroyer trying to cap A, although there is an enemy Orion pushing into that cap. But we'll see what happens. You know, it's a Clemson. It could be an actual seal clubber or somebody genuinely grinding. You never know with Clemson's. It's one of those ships. It's sort of the T-49 of World of Warships. But Andy is just pummeling away with the AP shells all the while and not doing too badly, but this is still relatively early in the game, so although that's not a huge amount of damage, you know, for this stage of a game in a battleship, especially a mid-tier battleship, it's not really unusual. So another nice broadside shot on the further away Orion, who is actually turning, so most of that misses and he just gets one ricochet. They've also failed to get a cap so far, so that coupled with the losses they've taken means that their points are starting to get perilously low. That will change somewhat rapidly, however. So, nice broadside Omaha. Let's see if this one does the trick. They naturally turn away, but a double Citadel finishes them off, and so that's at least one kill back in their favour. That Clemson, meanwhile, though, is getting absolutely pummeled and actually gets finished off by the Orion's secondaries. I think we can say that wasn't a seal clubbing Clemson. It does, however, leave the Orion on very low health. They must have taken some torps from the Clemson, so in fact they look like they're flooding as well. So that's a very ripe target to be picked off right now. Bit of a kill steal, in fact. He could just leave that Orion to go down and it would be oh, what's the name of the Beyond the Grave award in Warships? I should know this. It's the game I actually do play, but my mind's gone temporarily blank. Anyway, it would have been one of them for the Clemson, but Andy was a big old meanie and took down that Orion instead. Talking of being a big old meanie, there's another squashy cruiser. I rather like the Kuma, but yeah, you can't really do that in it, not at this range to a battleship, because again, double Citadel, that might well happen to you. There's always that thing with a lot of battleships where actually selling broadside gets you a good chance of being overpenned instead, but it's a bit of a risk, and especially with the British battleship AP, there's actually a very good chance that you will in fact get rather citadeled because it has those shorter fuses. Now at this stage, well, they've gotten the middle cap and things have evened out a bit, but they are still down on points. More pertinently, Andy is now in a bit of an awkward position between two enemy battleships. He could slam on the brakes and start reversing away from both of them, but that would make it quite easy for them to hit him. So he just keeps going forwards and, well, he's angled well against the Texas, but against this enemy Orion, not so much. And it's really no surprise to know that the enemy Orion is, of course, firing HE shells. However, they're giving enough broadside to Andy that he does stick with the AP. Because the HE, it's dangerous over time. You can wear people down, especially by setting multiple fires. But for the sheer, you know, shock factor of you're going to lose a lot of health at once, nothing really does beat AP shells. Well, for the most part. There are certain cruisers where British HE will actually, you know, pen and even citadel them. So, nice broadside on that Texas, who is quite close range, but oh look! There's an enemy destroyer, who is really very close. That is well within torpedo range, that Nicholas. And it's around about now, this is the moment I referenced earlier, it's around about now you'd be thinking, oh boy, there's going to be a lot of torpedoes coming in very soon. But it would seem the Nicholas is in fact reloading their torps because there is nothing. Nada. And so Andy's secondaries are pinging away, not landing that many hits, but this Nicholas isn't even firing at him. And then that happens. He just detonated a destroyer with his secondary guns. Yes, that can in fact happen. So we're up to 70k damage and 4 kills. And if you get some solid hits into this Texas, well, that'll do it. That does, however, leave this very healthy Orion on his other side, and it's going to take a while to swing his guns around, but at least he's gotten a heal back The thing is, though, the Orion's still firing HE, and at this level of health, there, yeah, Andy is basically going to just die. He does, however, have one option left, and he's going to take it. While this has all been going on, by the way, where you can see what's happened, most of their team has died, but there are just a couple of ships left. The Emil Bartin there, and of course this Orion, and they're pretty much both in Andy's face. His allies, well, he's killed a fair number of ships himself, but his allies have finished off everything else, and so although it was kind of a close game, really it's ended up not being that close, but in large part I think that is thanks to Andy, who has just gotten his 6th final kill and a high caliber by ramming that Orion, and that was absolutely the correct thing to do. At that point he was dead anyway, he was going to burn out, and so you might as well go for it, you might as well get the hit points. So there's not a lot left in this game at this point. The Emil Bartan's not on a lot of health, and in fact managed to run themselves aground there. The Wyoming is close enough to get some decent shots, and I think they get the kill, but I'm not 100% certain there. So, despite the somewhat derpy nature of the replay, the shells just not showing up, I thought that was a reasonably entertaining match, and although it was kind of a slow start, Andy ended that one with quite a big chunk of damage for a tier 5 game, top tier. That's not half bad. Nearly 140k, and of course a huge amount of it was from ramming that Orion. But even without that, he still would have had quite a lot. He still would have had nearly 100k. So yeah, but that was a nice extra amount of damage on top. It really was. And even if he hadn't kill secured that other Orion earlier on, he still would have ended with a Kraken. So, it's been a bit of a torturous one getting this video done. Hopefully it's been to your liking, though. Hopefully I didn't derp too much when making it, because it's sort of late when I'm finishing this up. This one's taken multiple takes, even through having power off most of the day. It's still been a little while getting this one finished, but here we are. I did it. Hooray! So hopefully you've enjoyed it, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down under the video, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.